You've been treating your anxiety as a disease to cure. You wake up every morning with that familiar knot in your chest, and your first thought is, what's wrong with me? You've read the books, you've tried the techniques, you've done the work, and still that feeling persists. What if I told you that you've been asking the wrong question this entire time? What if your anxiety isn't a disease at all? What if it's actually your consciousness expanding beyond the old limits you've been living within? Think about that for a moment. What if the very thing you've been trying to eliminate is the doorway to something you can't yet see? The self you're trying to fix doesn't exist the way you think it does. I know that sounds strange. You're listening to this right now. You can hear your thoughts. You feel like a separate person inside your skin. But what if that sensation of being a separate, isolated individual is itself the source of everything you've been struggling with? Your suffering isn't proof of brokenness. It's the friction of awakening. It's what happens when consciousness begins to outgrow the containers it's been living in. The caterpillar doesn't understand what's happening inside the cocoon. It only knows that everything it once was is dissolving. Here's the first curiosity gap I want you to hold. Why does trying harder to fix yourself actually make you feel worse? You've noticed this, haven't you? The more you work on yourself, the more broken you seem to become. The more techniques you apply, the more techniques you seem to need. What's actually happening there? And here's the second. What ancient truth did we forget about the nature of struggle? Every wisdom tradition, every mystical path, every genuine teacher has pointed to something that our modern self-improvement culture has completely obscured. We'll uncover that together. Let me begin with something that might disturb you. The self you think you are, the one you've been trying to improve and fix and heal, is a fiction. Not a poetic fiction, not a metaphorical fiction. An actual, verifiable fiction that you've been taught to believe is real. From the moment you were born, people started calling you by a name. They pointed to your body and said, "This is you." They pointed to your thoughts and feelings and said, "These belong to you." Slowly, gradually, through thousands of repetitions, you learned to experience yourself as a separate thing, a thing that exists independently from everything else, a thing that has problems, a thing that needs fixing. But look at this carefully. Where does this separate self actually exist? You might say it's in your body. But your body is constantly exchanging matter with the environment. The oxygen you breathe becomes part of your cells. The food you eat becomes your tissues. The atoms that made up your body 7 years ago have almost entirely been replaced. So which collection of atoms is the real you? You might say the self is your thoughts. But thoughts arise and disappear without your permission. You don't decide what you're going to think next. It just appears. If you were your thoughts, you'd be a different person every moment. And who would be the one watching those thoughts come and go? You might say it's your memories that make you who you are. But memories are notoriously unreliable. They change every time you recall them. They're reconstructed each time, not replayed like a video. And you certainly can't be the person you were at age 5 because that person had completely different cells, different thoughts, different feelings, different circumstances. What connects that child to you now except a story? This is what I mean when I say the self is a fiction. It's not that you don't exist. Obviously, something is here experiencing these words right now, but the way you've been taught to conceive of yourself as a separate, independent, continuous entity is a construct, a very useful construct in some ways, but also the source of all your suffering. Because if you're a separate self, then you're vulnerable. You can be diminished, you can fail, you can be inadequate, you need to defend yourself, you need to improve yourself. You're in competition with all the other separate selves. You're fundamentally alone. And that aloneness creates a hunger, a constant searching for completion. You look for it in relationships, in achievements, in pleasure, in spiritual experiences, in self-improvement. But nothing ever quite fills the hole, does it? Because the whole isn't real. The separate self that feels incomplete is itself the illusion. The organism and its environment are not two separate things. They're one unified field. You don't exist in the world the way a marble exists in a box. You exist with the world as an inseparable aspect of it. The idea that you stop at your skin is just that, an idea, a convenient way of organizing experience, but not the fundamental truth. Think about breathing. You can't breathe without air. Air can't be breathed without lungs. Where does the breathing happen? In you? In the atmosphere. It happens in the relationship. It happens in the dance between organism and environment. That's what you actually are, not the dancer, the dancing itself. This recognition changes everything. Because if the separate self is a fiction, then what exactly needs fixing? What exactly is broken? You've been trying to repair something that was never damaged because it was never actually the thing you thought it was. Sarah sits in her therapist's office for the 47th time. She's been coming here for almost 2 years now, working on her anxiety, her relationships, her childhood wounds. She's made progress, certainly. She understands herself better. She has language for her patterns, but somehow she doesn't feel fundamentally different. Today, she's talking about the same fear of intimacy she's been discussing since session 3. I feel like I should be better by now, she says. Like, I've done so much work. I understand where this comes from. I know my attachment style. I've processed the trauma. But I'm still terrified of letting someone get close. Her therapist leans forward slightly. What if you're not broken? Sarah blinks. But I'm here because I'm broken. Because I can't have normal relationships. Because something is wrong with me. What if nothing is wrong with you? What if your fear is a perfectly intelligent response to real experiences you've had? What if it's not a malfunction, but a function? Sarah feels something shift, just slightly, in her chest. But then my whole life has been about trying to fix this. Her therapist nods. I know. And what has that trying created? Sarah sits with the question. She feels the familiar tightness, the constant vigilance, the exhaustion of monitoring herself, managing herself, trying to be different than she is. More tired. She finally says, It's made me more tired. What would happen if you stopped trying to fix it? The question hangs in the air between them. Sarah realizes she has no idea. Her entire adult life has been organized around the project of self-improvement. Without that project, who would she even be? This is the exhaustion that many of you are feeling right now. The exhaustion of maintaining a false boundary, of constantly trying to manage and control and improve something that isn't actually separate enough to be managed or controlled or improved. You are not a static entity that exists independently and needs to be perfected. You're a process, a flowing, changing, dynamic expression of something much larger than the story you've been told about yourself. And you can't improve a process by fighting against it. You can only understand it. You can only flow with it. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you tried to improve your heartbeat? You don't, do you? Your heart knows what to do. It's been beating since before you were born, adjusting its rhythm to exactly what's needed in each moment. It doesn't need your management. It doesn't need your improvement strategies. It would actually be harmed by your interference. What if your entire being is like that? What if there's a fundamental intelligence operating that knows exactly what it's doing, and your constant intervention is the actual problem? This brings us to the crucial distinction between pain and suffering. Pain is what happens. Suffering is what we add to what happens. A physical injury creates pain. That's clean. That's direct. That's the body's intelligence signaling that something needs attention. But then the mind comes in. It starts telling stories. This shouldn't have happened. I should have been more careful. What if it gets worse? What if I never fully recover? Now, what if this affects my job, my relationships, my future? And suddenly, the clean pain has multiplied into enormous suffering. The same thing happens with emotional pain. All right, relationship ends. That hurts. That's natural, clean pain. The heart was open, now it's closing. There's a loss, there's grief. But then the mind adds, I'll never find love again. There's something wrong with me. I always mess things up. I'm unlovable. And the clean pain becomes sprawling, endless suffering. You've been taught that suffering is unavoidable, that it's just part of being human. But the Buddha had a different insight. He said that suffering is created by craving and aversion, by wanting reality to be different than it is, by grasping at what we want and pushing away what we don't want. And that grasping and pushing is what we add to the raw experience of life. This is why your attempts to control things often create the very chaos you fear. You're anxious, so you try to control your environment to prevent anxiety-triggering situations. But the control itself creates more anxiety. You're constantly vigilant, constantly monitoring, constantly preparing for danger. The control strategy multiplies the very thing it's trying to eliminate, or you feel sadness, and you immediately try to distract yourself. Entertainment, food, substances, work, anything to avoid the feeling. But the avoidance teaches your nervous system that sadness is dangerous, that it's something you can't handle. So the next time sadness arises, it comes with even more fear attached. The avoidance makes the thing more frightening. This is the paradox. Acceptance is actually what gives you power. Not acceptance as resignation, not acceptance as giving up, but acceptance as a clear seeing of what is, without the layers of resistance and story. When you accept that you're anxious right now, something shifts. You stop being anxious about being anxious. You stop fighting with reality. And in that moment of stopping the fight, you have room to actually feel what's happening, to be with it. And feelings, when you actually let them be, have a natural arc. They arise, they peak, they pass, but only if you don't interfere. Think about swimming. If you panic in water and start thrashing, you sink. The more you fight, the more you go under. But if you relax, if you let yourself float, the water holds you. It's counterintuitive. Your instinct is to fight, but the fighting is what drowns you. The same principle applies to your inner life. You're swimming in an ocean of sensation, emotion, thought, and the more you thrash against it, the more you suffer. But there's another way. You can learn to move with the current instead of against it. Your culture has taught you to glorify struggle. No pain, no gain. Hard work pays off. Push through, overcome, conquer. These are the narratives that surround you, and yes, sometimes effort is required, sometimes action is necessary. But there's a difference between aligned action and resistance-based action, between flowing with what wants to happen and forcing something against the grain. Can you feel that difference in your own life? The tasks that flow naturally versus the ones where you're constantly pushing? The relationships that have an ease to them versus the ones that require constant management? The goals that pull you forward versus the ones you have to drag yourself toward? What if you trusted that easier path more? What if you stopped believing that things only count if they're hard? Your body already knows things that your rational mind is constantly interfering with. Right now, as you listen to these words, your body is performing millions of coordinated actions. Your heart is beating, your lungs are breathing, your cells are metabolizing, your immune system is scanning for threats, your digestive system is processing, your nervous system is regulating. All of this is happening without your conscious input, without your management, without your improvement strategies. Your body is ancient wisdom. It's the result of billions of years of evolution. It knows how to heal wounds. It knows when to rest and when to move. It knows what nutrients it needs. It knows when something is dangerous. This knowing doesn't come from your thinking mind. It comes from something much older and much deeper. But somewhere along the way, you learn to override this intelligence. You learn to ignore your tiredness because you have deadlines. You learn to eat foods that make you feel terrible because they're socially expected. You learn to smile when you're angry because anger isn't polite. You learn to keep going when your body is screaming for rest because rest is lazy. You've learned to trust your thoughts more than your sensations, to trust concepts more than direct experience. And this split has created enormous suffering because your body is always in the present moment, always responding to what's actually happening, but your mind is usually somewhere else, replaying the past, rehearsing the future, analyzing, judging, comparing, planning. The invitation here is to come back, to drop below the constant chatter of the thinking mind and reconnect with the intelligence that's already here, not to abandon thinking. Thinking is useful, but to stop letting thinking dominate, to stop living entirely from the neck up. Let's try something together. I want you to bring your attention to your breath, not to change it, not to control it, just to feel it. Feel the sensation of air moving in and out. Feel where you sense the breath most clearly. Is it at your nostrils, in your chest, in your belly? Notice how your breath is breathing itself. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to manage it. It's just happening. This is the involuntary intelligence of your body. It knows exactly how deep to breathe, exactly what rhythm is needed right now. Now expand your awareness to include your whole body. Feel the weight of your body wherever you're sitting or lying. Feel the temperature of your skin. Feel any sensations of comfort or discomfort. Don't judge them. Don't try to change them. Just notice what's actually here in this moment, without thinking about past or future, without analyzing or solving anything. What's your direct experience? Not the story about your experience, the raw sensation itself. Most of the time, when you're just with raw sensation, without the layer of thought, things are actually okay. There might be discomfort, there might be intensity, but there's a quality of aliveness to it, a realness. It's when the mind comes in with its stories that the suffering multiplies. This is why meditation practices across traditions have emphasized this return to direct experience. Not because there's something magical about sitting quietly, but because it trains you to distinguish between what's actually happening and what you're adding to what's happening. Your thinking mind is constantly telling you that happiness is in the future. When I get that job, when I find that relationship, when I lose that weight, when I achieve that goal, then I'll be happy. Then I'll be at peace. Then I'll finally be okay. But the future never actually arrives. When you reach those goals, the mind just sets new ones. The goalpost keeps moving. Because the mind is not designed for contentment. It's designed for survival. And survival means constantly scanning for problems, constantly preparing for threats, constantly seeking advantage. This is psychological time. Time as a mental construct that pulls you out of the present. There's chronological time, of course. Things do unfold in sequence. The sun rises and sets. You were born, you will die. But psychological time is different. It's the me who has a past that defines me and a future that will complete me. It's living through the filter of then instead of now. And psychological time is where almost all your suffering lives. Regret lives in the past. Anxiety lives in the future. Both are thoughts happening now about times that don't exist now. The past is memory, which is present moment thought. The future is imagination, which is present moment thought. Neither has any reality except as a current mental event. Have you noticed how much of your day is spent in psychological time? Replaying conversations that already happened, rehearsing conversations that might never happen, analyzing past decisions, worrying about future outcomes, planning, reviewing, regretting, anticipating, all of it happening now, but experienced as if it's happening then. What's here when you let go of psychological time? When there's no past to define you and no future to get to, what's this moment like when it's not being used as a means to some other moment? For most people, this question creates a slight panic. Because without the story of time, without the project of becoming, who are you? What's your purpose? What are you supposed to do? And that panic reveals how deeply you've been conditioned to believe that you're inadequate right now and need to become something better in the future. The entire self-improvement industry is built on this belief. You're broken now, but if you buy this book, take this course, follow this program, you'll be fixed later. But what if someday I'll be fixed is the very thought that prevents you from being free right now? What if the search for future wholeness is what creates present fragmentation? Marcus has spent 15 years on the spiritual path. He's done silent retreats. He's studied with teachers. He's read hundreds of books. He meditates every morning. He's had profound experiences of unity, of expanded consciousness, of deep peace. And yet, underneath it all, there's still a subtle seeking, a sense that the real awakening is just around the corner, that if he just finds the right teacher, the right practice, the right insight, he'll finally arrive. He's sitting in a coffee shop when he overhears two people at the next table. One is describing an incredible spiritual experience she had at a recent workshop. His mind immediately starts comparing. She's having deeper experiences than I am. Maybe I should go to that workshop. Maybe my practice isn't working. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. Then he catches himself. He sees the pattern, the constant measuring, the perpetual sense of not being enough. the spiritual achievement game. And for the first time, he sees it clearly as just another version of the same inadequacy story he's been living his whole life. He's just replaced being a successful businessman with being an enlightened seeker. The content has changed, but the structure is identical. He feels something release in his chest, a long-held tension, because in this moment, he sees that there's nowhere to get to, that seeking enlightenment is what prevents enlightenment, that the one who is seeking is the obstacle to finding. He laughs quietly. The cosmic joke. He's been looking for what he already is. This is the myth of progress applied to consciousness. The idea that you can accumulate spiritual experiences and attainments the way you accumulate money or status. That there's a ladder to climb, levels to achieve, states to master. And at the top of the ladder, finally, you will be the enlightened person you've been trying to become. But consciousness doesn't work that way. You can't become what you already are. You're not trying to achieve presence. You're trying to recognize the presence that's already here. And recognition is not a future event. It's a current seeing. Every moment you spend trying to be more spiritual, more awakened, more conscious, you're reinforcing the belief that you're not those things now. You're creating a split between who you are and who you think you should be. And that split is the suffering. This doesn't mean practice is useless. Meditation, inquiry, contemplation, these can all be valuable, but not when they're done with the energy of seeking, not when they're another project of becoming. They're valuable when they help you see what's already true, when they reveal rather than achieve. The trap is subtle. You can turn anything into another way to feel inadequate, even awakening, even liberation. The spiritual ego is more sophisticated than the regular ego. It's proud of its humility. It's attached to its non-attachment. It judges others for being judgmental. It seeks recognition for being beyond seeking. Have you felt this in yourself? The subtle pride when you meditate? The quiet superiority when others seem less conscious? The way you collect spiritual experiences and insights like trophies? The way you perform spirituality for others and for yourself? This is spiritual materialism, using the path itself as another way to build up the sense of self. Another way to be special. Another way to be better than. And it's one of the most difficult traps to see because it disguises itself as progress. The real freedom is in seeing through all of it. Seeing that the one who wants to be enlightened is the only obstacle to enlightenment. That there's no one to become, nothing to achieve, nowhere to arrive, because you already are what you're seeking. You've just been conditioned not to see it. What if you're already whole? What if you always have been? What if the brokenness was only ever a belief, a thought, a story you were told and came to believe was true? Let me take you somewhere. Close your eyes if you can. Imagine you're standing at the edge of a vast ocean. The water stretches out to the horizon in all directions. The waves rise and fall in their eternal rhythm. You can hear them, feel the salt spray on your skin, smell the sea. Now imagine that you're not standing at the edge looking at the ocean. You are a wave in that ocean. You rise up out of the water, you crest, you foam, you crash onto the shore, and you return to the sea. For a brief moment, you exist as a distinct wave. You have a shape. You have movement. You seem separate from all the other waves. But are you separate? The water that makes you is the same water that makes every other wave. The energy that moves through you is the same energy moving through the entire ocean. You arise from the sea and return to the sea. You never actually leave it. This is what you are, a wave in the ocean of existence. For a brief moment, consciousness takes the shape of you. It looks out through your eyes, thinks through your mind, feels through your heart. It seems like there's a separate person here, independent from everything else. But it's the same consciousness looking out through every pair of eyes, the same life force animating every body. You are the ocean experiencing itself as a wave, and you've forgotten. You've become so identified with being this particular wave that you've lost the felt sense of being the entire ocean. Open your eyes, come back, but bring that recognition with you. You are not a separate thing in the world. You are the world temporarily appearing as this thing. This recognition is what the traditions call enlightenment, awakening, liberation. But these words have become so loaded, so conceptual, that they often obscure what they're pointing to. It's not a special state. It's not a mystical experience. It's the simplest, most obvious thing. You're what's here. You're what's aware. You're the presence in which everything appears. And when you see this, even for a moment, something softens. Because if you're not a separate self, then there's no separate self to be broken, no separate self to fix, no separate self to improve. There's just this, just the flowing, changing, dynamic process of life being itself. But here's where it gets tricky, because your entire psychological structure is built on the belief in separation. Your whole sense of identity, your whole way of organizing experience. And that structure doesn't give up easily. It fights to maintain itself. It creates suffering to prove that it's real and necessary. This is why shadow work matters. The aspects of yourself you've rejected don't just disappear. They don't stop existing because you've decided they're bad. They go underground. They operate from the shadows. They sabotage you in ways you can't see because you refuse to look. What have you rejected about yourself? What qualities did you decide were unacceptable? What feelings did you learn to suppress? What desires did you learn to be ashamed of? For most people, it's anger. We're taught that anger is bad, that good people don't get angry, that anger is destructive and dangerous. So we learn to push it down, to smile when we're furious, to be nice when we want to scream, and all that rejected anger doesn't go away. It leaks out sideways, it becomes passive aggression, it becomes depression, which is often anger turned inward, it becomes psychosomatic illness, it becomes sudden explosions that seem to come out of nowhere. Or maybe it's fear. You learn that fear is weakness, that you should be brave, strong, capable. So you override your fear, you push through it, you pretend it's not there, and it grows in the shadows. It becomes generalized anxiety. It becomes panic attacks. It becomes the constant background tension you've learned to think of as normal or desire. You learned that wanting things is selfish, that you should be content with what you have, that your needs don't matter as much as everyone else's. So you become the helper, the caretaker, the selfless one, and your rejected desires turn into resentment, into martyrdom, into a deep, hollow feeling of never being fulfilled. Whatever you've pushed away, whatever you've deemed unacceptable, that's where your energy is trapped. That's where your wholeness has been fractured. Not because those qualities are actually bad, but because you've created an inner war against them. The work is to turn toward what you've been turning away from, to meet the rejected parts with curiosity instead of judgment, to ask, what is this anger protecting? What is this fear warning me about? What is this desire pointing toward? When you stop fighting with yourself, when you stop trying to eliminate parts of your experience, something extraordinary happens. The energy that was bound up in repression becomes available. The inner conflict dissolves. What you thought was your enemy reveals itself as a messenger carrying important information. Your anger knows when your boundaries have been violated. Your fear knows when something needs caution. Your desire knows what brings you alive. These aren't problems to solve, they're aspects of your wholeness trying to speak. But you can't hear them if you're at war with them. You can't integrate what you're constantly rejecting. And as long as you're rejecting parts of yourself, you're maintaining the very fragmentation you think is the problem. This is why acceptance is so radical. True acceptance. Not the spiritual bypass version where you pretend everything is fine, but the real thing, the willingness to feel what you feel, to be what you are, to stop performing for an imaginary audience and just be here as you are in all your messy, contradictory, fully human complexity. What would that be like to stop trying to be anyone other than who you actually are right now? Most people have no idea because they've been performing for so long they've forgotten what's underneath the performance. They've been managing their image, controlling their presentation, trying to be acceptable, trying to be lovable, trying to be successful, trying to be spiritual, trying to be good. The real self has been buried under layers of conditioning and strategy. But it's still here. It never left. It's the one who's been listening to these words. The awareness that's been present this entire time. The space in which all experience appears. And that awareness is not broken. It never has been. It can't be broken. It's what witnesses the brokenness story. It's what's here before the story and after the story. It's the constant presence that remains no matter what changes in your experience. You are not your thoughts. You're what hears your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You're what feels your emotions. You are not your body. You're what's aware of your body. And that awareness, that presence, that consciousness itself is untouched by whatever appears within it. This doesn't mean you transcend being human. It doesn't mean you stop having thoughts and emotions and sensations. It means you recognize what you fundamentally are underneath all of that. And from that recognition, everything changes. Not because your experience necessarily changes, but because your relationship to your experience changes. You stop being at the mercy of your thoughts because you see they're just thoughts. You stop being overwhelmed by emotions because you see they're just energy moving through. You stop identifying as the story because you see you're the space in which a story appears. Let's talk about death. Because until you face death, you're not fully alive. You're living in a kind of protective bubble, pretending you have endless time, avoiding the fundamental fact of your existence. You will die. This body will stop working. These thoughts will cease. Everything you've accumulated, everything you've achieved, everything you've become will dissolve. For most people, this is terrifying. Death is the ultimate threat to the separate self. The separate self wants to continue. It wants permanence. It wants security. And death is the final insecurity. But there's another way to meet death. Not as an ending to be feared, but as a doorway to presence. Because when you truly acknowledge that you could die at any moment, when you stop living as if you have forever, something shifts. What becomes important? What stops mattering? When you imagine this is your last day, do you care about your status, your image, your achievements, or do you care about connection, about beauty, about this moment exactly as it is? This is memento mori. Remember death, not as a morbid preoccupation, but as a way to intensify aliveness, because everything becomes precious when you acknowledge its impermanence. This breath, this conversation, this sunset. You stop postponing life. You stop waiting for the right moment. You recognize this is the only moment you have. And here's the deepest recognition. You've already died thousands of times. The person you were at 7 years old is gone. The cells that made up that body are gone. The thoughts that filled that mind are gone. The person you were last year is gone. The you that went to sleep last night is gone. You die every moment. You're reborn every moment. There's no continuous self that persists through time. There's only this arising, this present moment expression of consciousness that has continuity only because memory creates a narrative thread. But the narrative is a story. The reality is constant change, constant dissolution and rebirth. So what is there to fear in death? The person who's afraid won't be there when death comes. That person is already gone, replaced moment by someone new, who's also temporary. The ego hates this. The ego wants to be permanent. It wants to matter. It wants to leave a legacy. It wants to be remembered. But who's going to remember? More temporary beings who will themselves dissolve. And if you zoom out far enough, eventually the sun will expand and engulf the earth, and every trace of human civilization will vanish. Every name, every achievement, every story will be gone as if it never existed. Does that thought create despair, or does it create freedom? Because if nothing ultimately matters in that cosmic sense, then you're free to have it matter in this immediate sense. You're free to care deeply about things that won't last. You're free to love fully knowing you'll lose. You're free to create beauty that will fade. The meaninglessness creates the possibility for meaning right now. This is the freedom beyond security, beyond guarantee, beyond permanence. It's the freedom of having nothing to lose because you never had anything to begin with. Everything was always borrowed. This body is borrowed from the earth. These thoughts are borrowed from culture. This consciousness is borrowed from the infinite, and eventually everything gets returned. Can you live from that recognition? Can you let everything be exactly as temporary as it actually is? The mind wants certainty. It wants to know. It wants to land somewhere stable and stay there. It wants to figure everything out. But life is not a problem to solve. It's a mystery to live. And part of living the mystery is dwelling in the space between opposites. The mind wants to categorize everything as good or bad, right or wrong, spiritual or mundane, enlightened or unenlightened. It wants clear distinctions. But reality doesn't actually work that way. Every up requires a down. Every inside requires an outside. Every here requires a there. Opposites don't contradict each other. They define each other. They mutually arise. You can't have pleasure without pain. Can't have joy without sorrow. Can't have something without nothing. The very existence of one pole creates its opposite. They're not two separate things. They're two aspects of one thing. But the mind doesn't like this. The mind wants to get to the good side and stay there. It wants permanent pleasure, permanent happiness, permanent peace. And so it's constantly trying to eliminate one half of reality, trying to get rid of the bad and keep only the good. And this creates the suffering of the pendulum. The more you push toward one extreme, the harder you swing back to the other. The more you try to be only happy, the more you're setting yourself up for sadness. The more you try to be only good, the more your shadow grows. The more you try to be only strong, the more your vulnerability threatens you. The wisdom traditions call this the middle way, not as a compromise between extremes, not as lukewarm moderation, but as the place beyond the polarity, the place where you're not identified with either pole, where you can experience both without being owned by either. This is what allows peace in the midst of chaos, joy in the midst of sorrow, equanimity in the midst of intensity, because you're not trying to have only one side. You're not at war with reality. You're flowing with the whole spectrum of human experience. Can you feel how exhausting it is to constantly judge everything, to divide every experience into wanted and unwanted, to be always choosing, always preferring, always pushing and pulling? What would it be like to let experience be what it is without that constant evaluation? This doesn't mean you become passive. It doesn't mean you don't have preferences. It means your preferences don't own you. You can want something without needing it. You can dislike something without being destroyed by it. You're flexible instead of rigid, responsive instead of reactive. And in that flexibility, you discover a joy that doesn't depend on circumstances. Not because circumstances don't matter, but because you're not imprisoned by them. You can be fully with whatever is happening without losing yourself in it. This is the freedom beyond right and wrong, beyond good and bad. It's not moral relativism. It's not saying that nothing matters. It's saying that the conceptual overlay you've been using to interpret reality has been creating suffering. And when you see through the overlay to the direct experience underneath, there's just this, just life being itself. Sometimes comfortable, sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes pleasant, sometimes painful, but all of it workable, all of it bearable, all of it part of the wholeness. Let's talk about relationships, because this is where the separate self-illusion gets most complicated and most painful. You've been taught that another person can complete you, that you're half waiting for the other half. That love means finding someone who fills your emptiness. But what actually happens? You meet someone, there's attraction, excitement, possibility, you fall in love, and for a while, it feels like you found what you were looking for, like you're finally whole, like all your problems have been solved. Then reality sets in. The other person has their own needs, their own wounds, their own shadows. They don't exist just to complete you. They have their own life, and slowly, the incompleteness you thought they'd filled starts to re-emerge. So you try to change them. Try to get them to be the person who will make you whole. Try to control the relationship to maintain the feeling you had at the beginning. And the more you try to control, the more the relationship suffers. The more you grasp, the more it slips away, or you lose yourself, you merge with the other person, you abandon your boundaries, your needs, your desires. You become whoever they need you to be. And you resent them for it even though you're the one who did it. And the resentment poisons the love. This is what happens when you bring incompleteness to relationship. When you're looking for someone else to fill the hole inside you, the relationship becomes about need instead of love, about taking instead of sharing, about filling emptiness instead of overflowing fullness. But what if you came to relationship already whole, not perfectly healed, not without wounds or patterns or triggers, but fundamentally okay with yourself, not needing the other person to validate you or complete you or fix you, just interested in sharing your life with someone else who's also complete. From that place, relationship becomes something entirely different. It becomes a practice ground, a mirror. Every trigger is showing you something about yourself. Every conflict is revealing a hidden belief. Every challenge is an opportunity to see more clearly. Your partner isn't making you angry. They're activating the anger that's already in you. Your partner isn't making you insecure. They're touching the insecurity that's already there. And if you can see that, if you can take responsibility for your own experience instead of blaming them, relationship becomes a profound path of awakening. But this requires a level of honesty that most people aren't willing to bring. It's easier to blame, easier to make them wrong, easier to focus on what they need to change than to look at what you're projecting onto them. What are you making your partner responsible for? What do you expect them to provide that you're not providing for yourself? What part of you are you rejecting and then criticizing them for? These are uncomfortable questions because they require you to stop being the victim, stop being the righteous one, stop being right, and instead become curious, become responsible, become willing to see your own shadow instead of focusing on theirs. When two people can do this together, when both people are committed to using the relationship as a mirror instead of a source of validation, something beautiful becomes possible. Not the fantasy romance, not the perfect union, but real intimacy. The kind where you're seen, fully seen, including your shadows, and loved anyway. Not despite your imperfections, but including them. This is what loving from wholeness looks like. Not needing them, but choosing them. Not fixing them, but accepting them. Not completing each other, but meeting as two complete beings who are interested in growing together. And here's the paradox. The less you need them, the more available you are for genuine connection. The less you're trying to get something from them, the more you have to give. Neediness repels. Wholeness attracts. Can you feel the difference in your own relationships between the times you're coming from need versus the times you're coming from overflow, between grasping and sharing? This shift doesn't happen by finding the right person. It happens by becoming the right person, by doing the work to become whole in yourself, by learning to meet your own needs, to validate yourself, to be your own source of security. Not so you don't need anyone, but so your relationships are about want instead of need, about choice instead of desperation. And when you meet someone from that place, when you're both whole, showing up to share your lives rather than incomplete showing up to be filled, that's when real love becomes possible. Not the fairy tale, the real thing, the thing that includes difficulty and disagreement and disappointment and still chooses to stay, still chooses to love, still chooses to see the divine in each other, even when you're very clearly seeing the human. Let me tell you about David. David is very busy. He's always in motion, always productive, always optimizing. He tracks his habits. He follows morning routines. He reads the productivity books and implements the systems. His life is a constant project of improvement and achievement. One day, his daughter asks him to play. Just play. No agenda, no goal, just be with her. And he realizes he doesn't know how. He's forgotten how to do anything without purpose, how to be instead of do. He tries. He sits on the floor with her toys. But his mind is already drifting to his to-do list. He's checking his watch. He's thinking about the work he should be doing. He's not actually here. He's not actually present. His daughter sees it. You're not really playing, Daddy. Your body is here, but you're not. And something breaks open in him. Because she's right. He's not really anywhere. He's always halfway somewhere else. Always focused on the next thing. Always moving towards some future achievement. And he's missing everything. He's missing this moment, this child, this life. The art of purposeless living is not about being lazy. It's not about abandoning responsibility. It's about remembering that life itself is not a means to an end. You're not living in order to achieve something. The living is the point, the being is the point. But you've been so conditioned to justify your existence through productivity, through achievement, through doing something worthwhile. You've learned that you have to earn your right to rest, to play, to just be. And this conditioning has stolen your ability to be present. Because presence has no purpose. Being here now doesn't accomplish anything. It doesn't get you anywhere. It doesn't produce anything. And so, the goal-oriented mind dismisses it as a waste of time. But what if presence is not a waste of time, but the only thing that's not a waste of time? What if all your busyness, all your achieving, all your purposeful activity is what's distracting you from what actually matters? Watch a child play, or watch an animal. They're not playing in order to get somewhere. They're playing because playing is what's happening. They're completely absorbed, completely present. There's no separation between the player and the playing. They are the playing. This is flow state, when you're so absorbed in what you're doing that the doer disappears, time disappears, self-consciousness disappears. There's just the activity happening, the music playing itself, the words writing themselves, the movement moving itself. And flow doesn't happen when you're trying to achieve something. It happens when you're so interested in what you're doing that the outcome becomes irrelevant. When you're painting, because painting is what's alive in you right now. When you're dancing, because dancing is what the body wants to do. When you're creating, because creation itself is the joy, not the product. Nature doesn't have goals. The flower doesn't bloom in order to be beautiful. It blooms because that's what flowers do. The bird doesn't sing to accomplish something. It sings because singing is its nature. The river doesn't flow to get to the ocean. It flows because flowing is what water does. You are nature. You are not separate from the natural world. You are an expression of it. And your true nature, like all of nature, doesn't need justification, doesn't need purpose. It just is. But the civilized mind wants everything to serve a purpose, wants everything to be useful, wants to extract value from every moment. And this constant extraction exhausts you, depletes you, turns life into a resource to be exploited rather than a mystery to be lived. What would it mean to trust purposelessness, to let some of your time be wasted, to do things for no reason, to create things no one will see, to have conversations that go nowhere, to sit and watch clouds move? For the achievement-oriented mind, this sounds like death, but actually, it's life. It's the part of life you've been too busy to notice, the part that doesn't serve any function, but is actually where the juice is, where the beauty is, where the meaning emerges not because you created it, but because it's inherent in existence itself. You don't dance to get to the end of the dance. You don't make music to reach the final note. You don't have a conversation to get to the conclusion. The value is in the doing. The meaning is in the process. The joy is in the activity itself, not in what the activity produces. Can you bring that attitude to your whole life? Can you stop living for the weekend, for the vacation, for the retirement, for the enlightenment? Can you recognize that this moment, right here, is not a stepping stone to some better moment? This is it. This is the moment you've been waiting for. This ordinary, imperfect, right now moment. When you see that, when you really see it, you stop postponing your life. You stop saving your energy for something important later. Everything becomes important, or nothing is important in that heavy, goal-oriented way. You're just here, just alive, just participating in a dance for no reason except that dancing is happening. And paradoxically, when you stop trying to get somewhere, you arrive where you've always been. When you stop trying to become something, you discover what you already are. When you stop seeking meaning, you find that everything is saturated with meaning just by virtue of existing. But there's one more trap we need to talk about, the spiritual trap. Because even the insights we've been exploring together can become another way for the ego to feel superior, another way to be special, another way to judge others who don't see what you see. You start meditating. You have some insights. You start to see through the illusions. And suddenly you're looking at other people who are still trapped, who are still seeking, who are still identified with their stories. And you feel sorry for them, or you feel superior to them, or you want to save them. This is the spiritual ego. It's more subtle than the regular ego. It says things like, I'm beyond ego. I don't care about material things. I'm just focused on consciousness. I'm more awakened than most people. Do you hear the judgment in that? The comparison, the sense of being better than? That's ego. Just wearing spiritual clothes. Or you collect spiritual experiences. You've had this insight, that awakening, this profound meditation, that mystical state, and you wear them like badges. You tell stories about them. You use them to establish your spiritual credentials. You create a spiritual identity that's just as trapped as any other identity. Or you turn your practice into a performance. You meditate so other people know you meditate. You talk about presence while completely absent, thinking about how present you seem. You use spiritual language to impress, to seem deep, to be seen as evolved. All of this is the pathless path being turned into another path, the goalless goal being turned into another goal, the achievement of non-achievement. And it's insidious because it's hard to see. Because you're doing all the right things. You're meditating, you're practicing, you're having insights. But the underlying motivation is still ego. Still the separate self trying to establish itself as special, as valuable, as worthy. The real freedom is in the ordinariness, in being nobody special, and having nothing to prove, and not needing to be seen as awakened or conscious or evolved, just being what you are, without the spiritual performance. What would it be like to keep all your insights private, to practice without anyone knowing, to have profound experiences and tell no one, to be ordinary in your presentation while extraordinary in your presence? This is the maturity of the path. When you stop performing spirituality and start being it. When you stop collecting experiences and start being the space in which experiences appear. When you stop trying to be someone spiritual and simply are. And here's the thing. Truly awakened people don't seem awakened. They seem completely normal. They laugh at stupid jokes. They get frustrated sometimes. They have preferences. They're human. But there's something different in the quality of their presence. Something relaxed. something undefended, something that doesn't need anything from you. They're not trying to teach you, not trying to save you, not trying to be your guru. They're just living their lives. And if you're open, if you're paying attention, you might learn something from being around them, but not because they're performing enlightenment, because they're not performing at all. This is the pathless path. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't lead to anything. It just is what it is. You're already here. You already are what you're seeking. The search itself is what obscures the finding. So what do? You stop doing. You stop trying. You stop seeking, not as a strategy to finally achieve what you've been looking for, but as a recognition that there's nothing to achieve, nowhere to go, no one to become. And in that stopping, in that giving up, something might be recognized, not by you, but as you. The awareness that's always been here, the presence that's never been absent, the consciousness that's reading these words right now and has been here the entire time. You are that. You've always been that. You couldn't not be that. It's what you are when you strip away everything you think you are. It's what remains when all the stories fall away. It's what's here before thought and afterthought. It's a space in which everything happens. And it's already free, already whole, already perfect, not as an attainment, as its fundamental nature. So where does that leave you? What do you do with this recognition? How do you live from it? You don't. Not as a separate you doing something special. You just live. You just be the same way you've always been living and being, but with less resistance, less friction, less grasping, less story. Things happen. Life unfolds. Thoughts arise. Emotions flow. Actions occur. But there's less sense of a separate you to whom all this is happening. There's just happening. Just experiencing. Just being. And it's completely ordinary. Disappointingly ordinary if you were expecting some dramatic transformation. Because nothing changes and everything changes. The content of your life might look exactly the same. But your relationship to it is fundamentally different. You're not fighting with reality anymore. Not at war with yourself. Not trying to be different than you are. Not postponing peace until some future condition is met. The peace is here. The wholeness is here. It's always been here. You were just too busy looking for it to notice it. This is the ultimate joke. The thing you've been searching for your entire life is what's been doing the searching. The one who feels broken is made of the wholeness it's seeking. The wave looking for the ocean is made of ocean. And when this is seen, when this is recognized, there's often laughter because it's so obvious, so simple, so here. How could you have missed it? But you can't make yourself see it. You can't achieve this recognition. It either happens or it doesn't. Grace, some traditions call it, a gift that can't be earned. Luck, maybe, or just the natural unfolding of consciousness waking up to itself. All you can do is stop getting in the way. Stop trying so hard. Stop seeking so earnestly. Stop improving so relentlessly. And in that stopping, in that giving up, in that surrender, maybe space opens for recognition. Or maybe not. Maybe you keep searching. Maybe you keep trying. Maybe this whole thing just becomes another concept in your collection of spiritual ideas. That's okay too, because there's no rush. You have all the time in the world, or rather you have this eternal moment, which is all the time there is. So let's come back to where we started. You've been treating your anxiety as a disease to cure, your depression as a problem to solve, your imperfection as a flaw to fix. You've been at war with yourself for as long as you can remember. What have you stopped? What if you laid down the weapons? What if you said to yourself, I am exactly what I should be in this moment, not because I'm perfect, not because I have it all figured out, but because this is what's here. This is what's true. Your anxiety is not your enemy. It's your nervous system trying to protect you. Your sadness is not your weakness. It's your heart trying to feel. Your anger is not your flaw. It's your boundary trying to assert itself. None of it needs to be fixed. All of it needs to be felt, to be accepted, to be allowed, not indulged, not identified with, but met with the same kindness you'd show a frightened child. You are not broken. You never were. You couldn't be. Broken compared to what? Inadequate according to whom? Imperfect measured against what standard? The standards themselves are the problem. The measuring is the problem. The constant evaluation and judgment and comparison is the problem. The belief that you need to be different than you are is the problem. What you are right now in all your messy human complexity is perfect. Not perfect meaning flawless. Perfect meaning complete, whole, exactly what should be. And I don't mean that in some spiritual bypass way where you pretend everything is fine when it's not. I mean that the struggle itself is part of the wholeness. The pain is part of the wholeness. The confusion, the doubt, the fear, the anger, all of it is part of what it means to be human. None of it needs to be excluded for you to be okay. You were never broken. You were just waking up. The pain you've been experiencing is not proof of damage. It's the inevitable friction that happens when consciousness starts to question the stories it's been living in. When the cocoon starts to dissolve, when the wave starts to recognize it's made of ocean. This waking up is not comfortable. It's not neat. It doesn't follow a linear progression. You don't just wake up one day and stay awake. You wake up and fall back asleep. You see clearly and then lose it. You recognize truth and then forget it again. That's normal. That's how it works. Don't judge yourself for falling asleep. Don't make that into another problem. Just notice when you're awake and notice when you're not. And gradually, so gradually you might not even notice, the awake moments become more frequent. The sleep becomes lighter. The clarity becomes more stable. But even that is not a goal to achieve. Even that is something that happens or doesn't happen. Your job is not to force awakening. Your job is to stop forcing yourself to sleep, to stop reinforcing the stories that create suffering, to stop identifying as the separate self that needs fixing. And how do you do that? You don't. Not as a separate you doing something. You just bring awareness. You just notice. You just see. And in the seeing, something shifts. Not because you made it shift, but because awareness itself is the light that dissolves the darkness. Every time you catch yourself in a story, that's awareness. Every time you notice you're identified with a thought, that's awareness. Every time you feel yourself resisting reality, that's awareness noticing resistance. And the awareness is what you are. Not the story, not the thought, not the resistance. The awareness itself. So practice that, not as a meditation technique, not as a spiritual discipline, just as a moment-to-moment recognition. What's here? What's actually happening right now when I strip away the story about what's happening? And you'll find that what's here is usually manageable, usually okay, usually just this moment with this sensation, this breath, this sight, this sound. It's a story about this moment that makes it unbearable. It's the projection into the future that creates anxiety. It's the replay of the past that creates regret. But here, now, without the story, What is there? Just this. Just being. Just the raw fact of existence before it gets interpreted. And that raw existence, that pure being, is what you are, not the content of your experience, the context in which all content appears. And that context is always okay, always here, always whole. You can't damage awareness, you can't break consciousness, you can't ruin presence. These are what you are, and they're indestructible. So stop trying to fix what isn't broken. Stop trying to improve what's already whole. Stop trying to become what you already are. Just be here. Just be this. Just be. Not as a technique. Not as a path to some better state. Just because this is what's true. This is what's here. This is what you are. And from that place of being, life continues. Things happen. Challenges arise. Pain comes. Joy comes. All of it still happens, but you're not destroyed by it because you know yourself as the space in which it all happens, the awareness that remains no matter what appears. This is freedom, not freedom from life, freedom to be fully alive, fully here, fully human, with all the mess and beauty and pain and joy that being human includes. You were never broken. That was always a story, a belief, a misunderstanding. You were just waking up from the dream of separation, from the illusion of being a separate, isolated, inadequate self. And waking up hurts. It's supposed to hurt. That's how you know it's working. But on the other side of that pain is something you can't imagine from here. Not bliss, not perpetual happiness, not some transcendent state. Just this. Just life, just being, but without the constant fight, without the constant rejection, without the constant sense that something is wrong. Nothing is wrong. Nothing was ever wrong. You are exactly what you should be. The universe is exactly what it should be. This moment is exactly what it should be, not because it matches your preferences, but because it's what's here. And what's here is always enough. Always complete. Always whole. Welcome home.